to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Dowd. I beg to move that this House has considered the impact of taxation on small and medium-sized enterprises. It is a pleasure, as always, to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Dowd, and I'm grateful to colleagues for attending this morning's debate. Small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of our economy. They create jobs, sustain local communities, and keep our high streets alive. Yet since the 2024 autumn budget, they have been met with higher taxes, higher costs, and a government that appears indifferent to whether they survive at all. Mr Dowd, it is almost impossible to know where to start with this debate, given the government's complete failure on the economy and its sustained neglect of business and enterprise. The Prime Minister speaks the language of growth, but lacks the backbone to take the decisions needed to achieve it. If this debate was simply an exercise in cataloguing failure, we would be here all day. Instead, I want to focus on the real-world consequences of this incompetence for the small and medium-sized businesses that keep our economy moving. In my constituency, I hear the same message repeatedly from business owners: staffing pressures, soaring energy bills, and rising financial costs, which, in many cases, have more than trebled as a direct result of decisions taken by this government. And this is not anecdote, Mr Dowd, it is reflected clearly in the data. Research from Zero shows just how precarious the situation has become. 2 in 5 SMEs do not even know whether they were profitable last month. That is not confidence, that is business flying blind. Since the 2024 budget, Labour has made a deliberate political choice to increase the burden on retail, hospitality and leisure. These are not marginal sectors, they are the lifeblood of our town centres, major employers and key drivers of local economic activity.
On that point, will my honourable friend give way?
Very happy to give way.
Thank you. Last week I was lucky enough to host a round table with some SMEs from Bromley, including the excellent Martin from the Crown and Anchor. They said to me that this government's policies are restricting their ability to grow, including hiring young people and the jobs tax. Would my honourable friend agree with me that abolishing business rates will give small businesses the boost they need to thrive?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that, and I agree with him entirely. Like him, I've held round tables with hospitality, and businesses are saying the same thing, that what they want to see is a cut in business rates and the Conservative pledge to entirely scrap business rates for those businesses under £110,000 is the right step and will be welcomed by business. It's something that I really hope the Minister will take up. Good ideas should be taken by this government, but they seem to find a problem with doing that. And my honourable friend mentions that, and it reminds me that in the Labour Party manifesto, Mr Dowd, which I'm sure you read clearly yourself, they pledged, and I quote, "Labour will replace the business rate system so they can raise the same revenue but in a fairer way." Well, that clearly hasn't happened because businesses are being hammered. I will.
I'm grateful to the honourable member securing this debate. I had a business rate summit in my constituency last week, and it came over that in York we're seeing a 35% average increase in business rates compared to the national 19.4%. So there is a geographical element to this too. Does he agree with me that we do need to revise the whole system, not least because things like a profit-related tax or turnover tax could bring in more revenue, but also cost those small businesses far less?
I thank the honourable lady for her intervention. I hope the Minister is listening, that this is a problem not just in constituencies in the south, but across the country. And this isn't just Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem or opposition members of Parliament raising this issue. Clearly, members of the Labour Party have this same problem. Now, I think the Minister should look at all good ideas, but clearly, currently, the Treasury orthodoxy is to carry on with what it's doing, to tax anything that looks like enterprise, anything that looks like business, anything that looks like job creation, and that will destroy our economy and harm our high streets. I'll give way to the honourable member.
Can I commend the honourable member for Farham and Borden for bringing this forward? He's absolutely right to underline this story, just to reinforce the issue. The Chancellor and the Finance Minister in Northern Ireland have rightly rolled back on the impact on tourism through the enhanced taxation that had been proposed. However, this feels more like a stay of execution than a solution. So it's happening everywhere, not just in England and Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland to a great degree. Does the honourable member not agree that a number of small uplifts in terms of rates, national insurance contributions, price of goods, etc., can no longer be absorbed by the knife-edge profit margins, that unless we stop these tax rises, and that's government's responsibility, our local economy will pay a deadly price?
And I thank the honourable member again, as always, bringing his experience from Northern Ireland, and it just goes to emphasise the point I was making prior to this, that this is a whole country problem. And he is absolutely right that we are at a knife edge. We are at an absolute tipping point for our small and medium-sized enterprises. And if they go under, the consequences will be dire. And if you want to speak Treasury speak, it means the Treasury will actually raise less money. The only way that the Treasury is going to raise more money is by freeing businesses up to expand, to grow, to employ more people. That is the way we get our economy going, not by taxing every single business until the pips squeak. Yeah. Now, Mr Dowd, I want to move on to hospitality in particular, because this has been a focus of mine since I was elected. It underpins community life and provides work for young people and those who rely on flexible hours. Yet, the government slashed retail, hospitality and leisure relief from 75% to 40%, an ideological and damaging decision, followed by eye-watering increases in rateable values from April of this year. Now, UK hospitality data shows that the average pub will see its business rates rise by 15% in the first year, climbing to a 76% increase by year 3. At the same time, online and out-of-town competitors are being protected. Distribution warehouses used by online giants will see increases of just 9% in year 1 and 16% by year 3. This isn't a level playing field. It's actively tilting it against the high street. The government's so-called emergency pubs relief announced this year does little to address the scale of the problem. It is a sticking plaster, not a solution. Just 1 in 20 retail, hospitality and leisure businesses will benefit. And even then, the average pub will still be paying £5,700 more in business rates than before. Business rates are simply not being reduced. And these pressures are compounded by changes to employer national insurance contributions introduced at the 2024 budget. For the hospitality sector alone, this amounts to £1 billion every single year. More than 774,000 hospitality workers have been dragged into employer national insurance for the first time, disproportionately affecting part-time staff, such as bar workers and waiting staff. Flexible work is being punished, young workers are being hit hardest, and employing people is becoming more expensive at precisely the wrong moment. This is not pro-growth, and it is not pro-work. VAT policy has also failed small businesses. The £90,000 VAT registration thresholds actively discourages growth and creates perverse incentives for firms to cap expansion. The government has ignored repeated calls for a reduced 12.5% VAT rate for hospitality, a policy that would support growth, improve competitiveness and align the UK with many of our European neighbours. The refusal to act is holding back an entire sector. The PPS is chuntering from the PPS seat. I'm sure he will be able to hold his own debate at some point and tell us all what's going on in his constituency. I suspect if he was honest with this chamber, he would be telling them the impact that his government's policies have had on the sector and how it's absolutely destroying his high street like it's destroying mine. These pressures are not theoretical. They're being felt by real businesses across my constituency. One example, Mr Dowd. At Birdie's Cafe in Farnham Park, business rates have increased by 550%, from £290 to £1,600 a month, a change that has already cost the business a member of staff. Energy bills have risen from £300 to £400 a month to £3,500 a month, while rising wage costs and changes to employment law have forced the owner into rolling 3-month contracts, a worse outcome for workers driven entirely by this government's pressure and policies. At the Bat and Ball pub, business rates are doubling from £800 to £1,600 a month, and minimum wage changes have added £56,000 a year to their wage bill. And across my constituency, from the Antiques Warehouse, the Pack House, the Bluebell Pub, Serena's, the Six Bells, the Healy Pub Group and Hamilton's in Farnham, to Acorn's Coffee House, the Old Dairy and Isaiah's in Borden, Oliver's Cafe and Wine Bar and David's Menswear in Hazelmere, Small World IT and Passfield Stores in Passfield, Little Latte in Tilford, the General Wine Company in Stedman Blower in Liphook and the Greta Inn in Gretham. These are all community businesses that have written to me or spoken to me facing the same relentless squeeze from government tax and regulatory decisions. These are not failing businesses. They are community anchors being priced out by this government's policies. These issues are not confined to hospitality, Mr Dowd. Yesterday I met with Medicines UK to discuss the impact of government policy on suppliers of generic medicines. They raise serious concerns about the extended producer responsibility packaging tax. Packaging, obviously, is mandated by the MHRA for safety reasons, leaving companies with little ability to reduce their tax liability. As a result, costs are either absorbed or passed directly onto the NHS and therefore the taxpayer.
Will my honourable friend give way on that point?
I will do.
I know he's talking specifically about businesses and enterprises, but on that last point, these decisions that are taken by the government are also impacting charitable institutions as well. Indeed, I've met some in my constituency of Bromley and Biggin Hill who are having to let charitable staff go and therefore having a further impact on the NHS.
My honourable friend from Bromley and Biggin Hill is absolutely right. And one of the perverse outcomes of the many tax implications that this government has put on is that whilst the NHS is exempt from some of these tax rises, rightly so, those who operate out around the NHS, for example, care homes, hospices and other charitable institutions are being hit. Even GP surgeries are being hit. This is the nonsense of what we see from this government. It is, I'm afraid, people taking policy off the shelf from Treasury civil servants without really understanding the real-world impact that it's having on businesses, on the charitable sector, and, in general, our constituents. And as my honourable friend alludes to, in effect, this is a tax on the NHS by another name. This obviously sits alongside the VPAG levy, which takes 10 to 35% of NHS sales from manufacturers, and taken together, the government is heavily taxing life-saving medicines, often at higher rates than comparable systems overseas, with clear implications for supply and sustainability. Now, Mr Dowd, in my November debate on alcohol duty, which I'm sure you've read in detail from Hansard, I was disappointed by the Exchequer Secretary's dismissal of the impact of tax rises on hospitality. But since October 2024, 90,000 hospitality jobs have disappeared. If that many jobs were gone from a car plant or an oil refinery, this House would be in uproar. But because it's pubs and cafes, ministers look the other way. That is a scandal. I therefore urge Treasury... Yes, I will.
The Scottish Affairs Committee has just done a study of, or doing a study of High Street, the viability of high streets. We had a professor from Glasgow University who specialised in the subject, and he made an extraordinarily convincing case that basically Amazon is being subsidised by the high street, and Amazon being hugely undertaxed and the high street being overtaxed. And I wonder if you would support me in getting the Minister to look into that subject and the cost of whether they're actually killing our high street. Thank you.
I think the honourable gentleman makes an interesting point that what would be fairer would be see some equity between the online providers and the retailers who are physically on the high street and have to pay things like business rates. I can see the Minister has heard his point, and I'm sure that he will respond to it. Whether the honourable member will get the answer he wants, I'm less certain of. But going back to the point that I was making, Mr Dowd, because it is pubs and cafes, ministers look the other way, and that is a scandal. I therefore urge Treasury ministers to review the cumulative burden placed on small and medium-sized enterprises through tax and regulation. Any response today will be taken directly to the hospitality roundtable I am hosting this Friday with publicans, restaurateurs and cafe owners. And I will return to where I began, Mr Dowd. The Prime Minister talks about growth, but refuses to show the backbone required to deliver it. The government's failure on business and enterprise is not abstract. It is written into higher taxes, lost jobs and boarded up high streets. If ministers continue to ignore this, we really could spend all day listing the consequences. With the spending review now replaced by an OBR forecast, the government has 8 or maybe 9 months before the next autumn budget. I urge them to use that time wisely. Boost businesses, not blight it. Support SMEs, don't punish them. Because when local businesses fail, communities pay the price.
Yeah.